Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Ikana Kingdom was founded on this land, stained with a history of darkness drenched in blood. Even now it is a place where troubled and regretful spirits gather. If you are seeking the one who is stronger than you are, you may find strength here from a group of spirits plagued by lingering regrets. If you have faith in your skills and might, then try saving these wandering spirits.
But the earthly price you must pay is 30 rupees.
Will you still do it?
Yeah.
You are our boy of much vigor. Defeat the ladies within the time limit and rest their souls in peace. But if your life energy drops below 3 hearts, I will stop the match. Mercy is the least I can offer.
Are you prepared? Yeah, we said that before. In the last part, we ventured deeper into Ikana Canyon, getting ourselves the owl statue here, and also getting the Gibdo mask in the process. And now we're doing the only real minigame that Ikana Canyon has to offer, at least until after the dungeon. We gotta take care of the 4 Poe sisters from the Forest Temple in Ocarina at a time in about 3 minutes. The way they work is they're more or less posed, but they go invisible after a little bit, and they then do 2 or 3 rotations of their torch charge before becoming visible again. I do the stupid thing here and am locked onto them with the Z targeting more or less the entire time out of habit. I don't really notice it as much when I'm playing Ocarina, but the faster way to actually fight all 4 of them, at least especially with the first 3 that they throw at you, is to not Z-target them and just free aim, because they actively become visible more frequently when you're not Z-targeting. They do also throw 2 of them at once at you, which seems threatening, but based on the fact since they're just more or less texture swaps with no real mechanical differences, you don't have to fear too much here. The fact we also don't have to deal with any of the little puzzles, like reuniting a 3-dimensional block puzzle to reassemble the Poe, it means this goes by pretty quickly. I think you can use the magic arrows on this to speed it up a little bit, but I have not done that in forever, if only because I just never really think to do it for some reason. A part of it probably comes down to, in Ocarina time, I never really have any of the magic arrows before I do the Poe Sisters fights, because you'd really have to go out of the way to do that. You need to go into the Forest Temple, get the bow, and then just completely drop that dungeon period, opting to go for fire into water to grab the stuff you need for those at that point. Which, you know, possible. Not really worth it in my eyes, but possible. I guess at that point, it's also technically possible as soon as you get the... I think you just need the hook shot to get across to Gyarados Fortress. You could just... Oh no, I think you actually need the long shot to do anything there, so maybe the strategy in that case. Forest Temple, bow, Water Temple, beat that, get fire arrows and long shot, go after Gyarados Fortress, do stuff there, access the training ground, and just see how much you can get done there to get the ice arrows. Maybe I should do that the next time I play that game, just to try something different. Ocarina and Majora are not games I very much vary up what I do in terms of the raw base order. Sometimes if I make a mistake, like forgetting to turn in the pictograph for the contest before finishing Woodfall or things like that in this playthrough, I'll have to go out of my way to maybe do an extra 3-day cycle or something to get extra stuff done, but ultimately when I play this game, my playthroughs are pretty samey, but that's partially just a Zelda problem, period. There's not a lot of ways for you to vary things up besides maybe like using different rings in the Oracle games or things of that nature.
It seems their souls have been healed. I give to you the earthly possession which the ladies kept. Take it, Link.
And all that for another piece of heart.
That is your name, correct? I can read people's hearts. I knew you would be coming here. Now my own soul's been healed too. With that...
And that's the end of that. For now, though, it's time for us to hit our next area of interest here in Ikana Canyon. And technically, there's a couple, because you could head technically towards the dungeon by taking the door on the northeast of the map, but there's even a Great Fairies fountain you can find here. But we want to head to the Empty Well, entry prohibited due to ghost sightings. Get on your Gibdo mask, because it's time for us to deal with more Gibdos ourselves. And when you have the Gibdos mask on, they don't attack you. They just interact with you like they're NPCs. Leave it, leave it. Leave me something blue that bestows health. So, this little sub-dungeon is sort of reminiscent of, and this is a game I've been meaning to do for years, the little mole underground cave in Earthbound. in that you need to give items to the Gibdos to open the door behind them. For instance, this one wants 5 magic beans. The items you need here depend slightly on your version in that if you needed multiples of an item, that you just need 1. Before you come in here, you're gonna want at least 5 magic beans, 10 Deku Nuts, 10 bombs, a fish, a bottle of milk, a blue potion, and for after this area, you're also gonna want a powder keg. This is why earlier in this 3-day cycle, I went out of my way to grab a lot of those items. It might have seemed out of the way at the time, but it just saved me time having to go and get them now. Technically, it would have been easier to go get them now in terms of, like, showing it for LP flow, but oh well. By and large, if an item required multiple, like the 5 magic beans or the 10 Deku Nuts, you only need one of them in the 3DS version, and that is an honest benefit there. There are also some items, though, that are kind of hard to get that they want in here. Deliciously fresh, by the way, that is the fish. But by and large, barring, I think, the blue potion, any item that the Gibdos want can be found somewhere in the various halls here. For instance, in here, you can find bugs, and there's at least 2 or 3 mummies that want bugs. On top of that, you don't even need to visit every room. There are chests in here with rupees that if you're still running low on the 5K goal, I could recommend going out of your way to get. But the only places you need to go are the far right and center pathways of this well. Because if you bring in the magic beans ahead of time, you don't need to go to the left pathway that goes straight north from the entrance whatsoever. I am showing off every route, though. Although once I get to the point where, by and large, you can just go to the exit, I am going to speed it up just so you can see what it roughly looks like. Dungeons like this, I'm not the biggest fan of in any game, only because usually the items they want from you are just so out of the way it feels kind of annoying. I don't mind it if, say, it's like how I remember... Yeah, I say how I remember because it's been a hot minute since I played this game. The dungeon at the end of the first third of Okami. There were some cases where you needed to go back and forth in that, but all the things you needed were always in that area. It was more like they were akin to small keys than anything, if memory serves. I've been meaning to play that game again, but that game from memory is about 1.5 times as long as it should be. Like, they could have cut some parts of that, and it still would have felt great. Or even just trimmed things down a little bit. This room is where you can get the easily hardest item to get in the game. This is where you can get yourself a big Poe, and you're gonna need this for one of the Gibdos. You theoretically could also use the one from Dompe's minigame on the 3rd night. But at that point, you are very close to the end of the world. So probably not the best idea if you're trying to get more stuff done this 3-day cycle. Back in the day, this place used to intimidate me not just because of the literal zombies floating about and the ghosts and the very grim atmosphere, but also just because of how many items you needed to really get through it. And now that I know a lot of them I'm gonna need ahead of time, it's not too bad, but it is still kind of tedious. Like, I'd say this is probably the game's lowest point overall for me. In fact, Ikana Canyon in general is probably my least favorite section of the main 4 nowadays. But it's just because by this point, the pace kind of slows down in terms of how many things you can do. Because at this point we have, what? I think we have half of a heart container with the heart pieces right now. Got one from the boss. So we have like 12-ish heart pieces remaining, somewhere about. I forget the exact number, of course, and Future Me will probably correct me as I'm saying this. But Ikana, if you know your way around, is easily the point in the game where you just have the least to do. It's because mostly there's just that little left to do. There's not much to do here. And that does kind of lead into an interesting thing I find about the game's areas. By and large, you get less and less population in the areas as you go through the game. At least in terms of, like, friendlies. Because between the Witch Sisters, the Pictograph Contest dude, the guy with the shooting gallery, and all of Deku Palace, there's a lot of life in Southern Swamp. Mountain Village may be small, but there's quite a few Gorons around in Goron City to keep that place feeling active. Great Bay, in terms of friendlies, only really has the Seaside Lab, the Fisherman, and the very small amount of Zoras at Zora Hall. But in Ikana Canyon, you really only have Pamela and her father. Technically, there's a couple of other NPCs around, yes, but I wouldn't exactly call them friendly off the bat. And that even kind of leads into one of the prevailing fan theories, and I guess I am getting a little ahead of myself here with Majora's Mask. A lot of people like to read into this game that Link died at some point before the game started, and this is all him dealing with death and going into purgatory or the underworld in some ways. Like, I remember a lot of people read Clocktown as being the stage of grief that's denial, because of everyone and people just kind of denying that the moon looks like it's falling for a good bit there. Woodfall is anger and wrath because of how the king treats the monkey immediately, even though the monkey's telling the truth about what happened to his daughter. The slowly freezing, almost apathetic nature of Snowhead is depression. Mikau asking you to help him on top of the way people act in general in that area would be bargaining. And then this place, Ikana, is acceptance because of the literal Walking Dead. And I like that theory a lot, but I really... nowadays, there's really no way it can be true with just current canon with what we know thanks to the Hyrule Historia, because this is not this Link's last appearance. It's his last appearance in green, but it's not his last appearance, period. That way leads to the exit, so now we're going to speed up the rest of the area because I just want to empty out my bottles and all that. I technically did lead you guys a little astray earlier in the area, in the LP even, that you actually don't need the blue potion to leave the area, but if you want to explore every room and get all the chests, you do need to. And this is kind of worth it in the long run if you're kind of running low on health, because the area that looks kind of like a dum-dum lollipop on the top of the map here is a fairy's fountain. But I don't really need to. But yeah, like, there's a cow there, so you can get milk here if you need to. It's just that you might need some items to get there to begin with. I've never been quite sure what the overall most efficient path would be, like where to get bugs to get through those Gibdos pretty quickly and all that jazz. And there probably is a much more efficient method than what I tend to do here. But it's overall just not that big of a deal to me because I'm here for so little time in the long run of the game. Thankfully, once we're done with the well, what I consider the first half of Ikana is gonna be all wrapped up. Because I consider the first half, technically, as soon as you first visit for Shiro, through getting through the well, that includes, like, visiting all 3 days of Ikana Graveyard. Because it's just so out of your way for so much of the game. Because other areas, you get the owl statue pretty immediately upon first entering. You have to wait until you finish 3 dungeons to get the one here, and it just makes it feel kind of out of the way and hard to really approach in comparison. For now, though, thank God I have exactly 4 arrows because I need them to light these torches in order for us to progress in here. And you might notice there's 2 really unusual looking things in this room. We got a block with the sun on it and a weird little sun emblazoned on the wall. Thankfully, the item we need to deal with those is right in there. And it's quite a design shift from this equivalent item in Ocarina of Time. This is the mirror shield. It can reflect certain kinds of light. Press R to assume a defensive position. If you press R while Z targeting, you can move while defending yourself. We'll put an evil, afraid face on the mirror shield. I just want to talk. You gave young me nightmares. Functionally, though, the mirror shield is identical to how it was back in Ocarina. You get in some strong light, you can reflect at things to activate switches like those sun switches, or use the block of time animation on sun blocks to get them out of your way. I like the mirror shield's usage in this game only because you get to use it more, it feels like, than you did in Ocarina, but that's because you have it for the entirety of the dungeon in this one and not just about half of it. But we're not done with this area's mini-dungeon. Oh no, it's just beginning, technically. Ikana Valley has some very good music attached to it. The Royal Castle of Ikana and the dungeon theme overall for this area are just so good. With that said, this is the technical mini dungeon for this area alongside the Pirate's Fortress and the Deku Palace as well, actually. In fact, now that I think about it, by and large, all the sub-dungeons are like fortress castle-y type areas, huh? Now, you can enter this place technically by another method, but you need the mirror shield to do that anyway. And frankly, I need to actually use that other way real quick because I need arrows to even begin this place because there's 2 frozen ice switches right inside. That's actually why I went on my way to go crash those pots because I need them. Before we talk about that entrance in more depth though, something you can do that's pretty handy is another very good rupee grinding location is now available to you now that we've made it here. If you come just inside, there are 4 re-deads who, if you have any of the masks of the dead on, be it the Gibdo mask or the Captain's mask, they do a silly dance. Killing a re-dead, they have a lot of health for now. We'll have a way to kill them at one shot once we're done with this area. Drops a guaranteed 20 or 15 rupees, either 3 blues or 1 red. So if you just enter and exit this room over and over again, you can build rupees up pretty quickly. If you do the quick analog stick rotation, spin attack, that will probably drain your thumb pretty quickly of its energy, but it's worth doing as a grinding spot for this 3-day cycle, especially because we're not actually doing the dungeon this 3-day cycle. I have other stuff I want to do with it next time. Until you clear the dungeon, or at least get the dungeon item, it's your best way of grinding. Because the dungeon item of the next dungeon is the best way to grind rupees overall. So now that I'm back out here to get some arrows, the entrance to Ikana Castle is always visible. It's right over there. That's the main gate, but you can't open it. Instead, there's a little cave off to the side we have to worm our way into. That is honestly very easy to miss because it's the only time you really need to be on this side of the river, barring entering the Great Fairy's Fountain and the dungeon overall. Hit that switch, it makes more lights, and we can hit that sunblock like so, although the range on the mirror shield is sometimes a little weird. Sometimes if it's just too far away, it won't activate. Also, sometimes it feels like you need to be very much centered on targets like blocks for it to actively count. But that was also a thing in Ocarina, by and large, so not a big deal. So, Ikana Castle has 2 wings, a north wing and a south wing. And in order to actually progress, we need to head to the north wing first. But I might as well open the south wing door while I'm here. Now, the first room of the north wing is actually a little different in the 3DS release, in that what we're going to have in here is actually a bit of reused content from the Forest Temple. There's a ceiling here that you can raise by hitting a switch. However, when you hit it, it raises, yes, but it crashes back down after a minute. So you need to get to the locked door, but how do you open the locked door? There's a switch up there. The game doesn't do a good job signposting this, but if you're in a deck of flower when it falls, if you jump out, it just knocks it back up. I think in the 3DS release, the switch only needs to be pressed once, and it'll just raise and lower periodically, but if you jump out of the deck of flowers, I think it might be a void out. Again, I've only played Majora's Mask 3D a couple of times in comparison to the N64, so some of my memories, especially on the later portions of it, are a little more scattered. And in this room, I technically don't need to do it, but I did it for this LP just for safety's sake. There are invisible platforms we need the Eye of Truth, the Lens of Truth to see. To get over here, press this switch and open the door. It's at this point, by the way, I should remind you, earlier this 3-day cycle, we bought ourselves a Powder Keg. The Castle of Ikana is what you're gonna need that Powder Keg for. So if you decided to wait until you actively needed it to pick it up back at the bomb shop, in a few moments there's gonna be a good opportunity for you to use the Song of Soaring and go get that. It's not too out of the way at that point, but it's just better to have it on hand. So, I actively do a little bit of an oopsie-doopsie here. Up here is a twofold area. we need to hit a switch up here to actually progress, and it's not that one that's immediately visible. That one lowers the fire to get that piece of heart over there. And I even see the switch on screen, but I don't get it on my first travel through here. The reason I'm going across the outside here is that there's weirdly, and I never quite understood why. In fact, I'll look up in a moment to see if there's an exact reason why this is here. On the top of the pillar on the far south side of the area, there's a paper airplane for some reason. Weird. Yeah, though, the deck of flowers there on the left side of the screen, you actively need to use those to get over to a pressure switch to open something that makes progressing in the south half of the dungeon possible at all. But my brain's like, oh, the piece of heart, I gotta get that. But that means I actually have to backtrack my way up here in a few moments. Oh, well, not a big deal with a waste of time since we're not actually doing the dungeon this 3-day cycle, but whoopsie all the same. Now, you technically can skip the southern half of this dungeon in a very specific way. There's a way for you to stand on parts of the fence surrounding the southern half of the roof, and that allows you, if you place your shot correctly, to throw the powder keg onto the thing we're going to use it on, and then just wait for it to explode to completely skip the southern half. Is that worth it, time investment-wise? Debatable. Because the southern half isn't that complicated, but there is a mini-boss down there we're gonna have to deal with, so, oh well. Probably bounces out in the long run. The second half of Ikana Canyon, though, thanks to areas like this in the dungeon, just has such a more interesting atmosphere than just the very dead and empty Ikana graveyard and canyon. But they still feel very interconnected in a way that I appreciate. Again, Majora's Mask, both aesthetically and atmospherically, is a very unique game, and the only games that really approach it in terms of trying to be the same type of atmosphere are Twilight and Tears. But they do it in radically different ways. Because part of what makes Termina so memorable is just how weird it is, whereas Twilight and Tears try to go for more of a horror aesthetic. So here's the thing that makes those particular redeads very useful. If you hit a lot of enemies in this dungeon's interior with the Mirror Shield's light, they get stunned or instant killed, and that includes the redeads. It freezes the floor masters and all that. Oh, hi again, Wizrobe. We haven't seen you since Snowhead. This is our third fight against you. We're a little thin there, buddy, but at least it's been a while. Thankfully, at this point, because we have the Gilded Sword, this fight doesn't take very long at all. Gilded Sword, I believe, does do... If it doesn't do more damage than the Goron Punch, it does enough to be comparable. Also, hello, reused animation from the Twin Rova fight. I'm kind of surprised by this fight. They don't even try to, like, vary this fight up a little more besides just the placement of the panels they can appear on. Like throwing two of them at you, or maybe having some elemental hazards to deal with besides just its magic. Also, fun thing, there's multiple redead dances. Some of them twirl, some of them do the Cossack. I think they added a couple of dances to the 3DS version. Like, I want to say they added a reference to the Thriller dance in some form. This cracked ceiling right here is what we need to use the powder keg on. Try as you might with any other explosive, it will not work. I do think they could have marked this a little more clearly to be that, because you could try the Goron Pound, the Bombs, Bomb Chews, or the Blast Mask, and it just won't work, but I guess at that point, there's not many other explosive options you have. Still, it's kind of annoying to go all the way out of the way for it, if you didn't have one by now. And that will bring light down into the central room of Ikana Castle. Funnily enough, it's placed in just such a way that it won't kill any of the redeads down there. But that will allow us to reflect light into a sun switch in this main room to progress towards this area's boss. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 24, oh god, I'm sorry, oh dear. We're gonna go finish off the Royal Castle, and see where we can go after that. See you guys then.